This is a special called meeting of the City of Paducah Board of Commissioners. Please ask the clerk to call roll.
Commissioner Henderson,
Present.
Commissioner Smith,
Here.
Commissioner Wilson,
Present.
Mayor Bray.
Present. Before we proceed with the hearing, are there any motions?
Sorry. I hereby move that to ratify the orders issued by the Board of Commissioners and signed by Mayor George Bray, specifically the order of pre-hearing evidentiary motions dated January 17, 2023.
Second.
Okay. I have to go through all, I'm sorry. The orders of respondents' motion to dismiss dated January 17, 2023. The order on respondents' motion for written decision on motion, dismiss and/or continuance dated January 17, 2023. The order of respondents' motion for clarification and on reconsideration regarding zero tolerance policy dated January 17, 2023. And the order on respondents' motion for clarification and/or reconsideration regarding not privy communications.
Second. Call roll.
Commissioner Henderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Mayor Bray.
Aye. So we are here to conduct a full public hearing pursuant to KRS 83A-0409 in the matter of Board of Commissioners versus David Guess relating to the charge of misconduct in the performance of his duties of office for a series of text messages sent by Commissioner Guess to a city employee on November 8, 2022. Have both parties ensured that their witnesses are sequestered?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
We will enter into evidence the resolution adopted by the Board of Commissioners on December 15, 2022 as Exhibit 1.
Do you all have copies? Do you need a copy or do you have one?
I have one.
The case will be presented by the Honorable Carol Pettit, and David Guess will be defended by the Honorable David Riley. Counsel will be provided the opportunity to present an opening statement, with Ms. Pettit going first and Mr. Riley going second. Each attorney will be allowed up to 10 minutes to make an opening statement. Madam Clerk will time each and let you know when you have 1 minute left. Thereafter, Ms. Pettit will present proof in support of the charge against Commissioner Guess, and Mr. Riley will be entitled to cross-examine each witness. Mr. Riley will then be permitted to present proof in support of Commissioner Guess, and Ms. Pettit will be entitled to cross-examine each of his witnesses. Ms. Pettit will then be entitled to present rebuttal witnesses, if necessary, with Mr. Riley having the opportunity to cross-examine each. At the close of proof, each counsel will be given the opportunity to present closing statements, with Mr. Riley going first and Ms. Pettit going thereafter. Again, each attorney will be given 10 minutes, and the clerk will keep time. After closing statements have been presented, Commissioner Wilson, Smith, Henderson, and myself will go into executive session pursuant to KRS 61.810F and J to deliberate with no vote being taken. We will then return to the public hearing for a vote in public session. Are the parties ready to proceed?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Pettit, do you wish to make an opening statement?
I do, thank you. Board of Commissioners, opposing counsel, Commissioner Guess. Misconduct. Misconduct is an intentional wrongdoing or improper behavior. That is the primary and actually sole issue that brings us here today. We're here today to determine if a single act was committed by Commissioner David Guess on November 8th, 2022, and if that act constitutes misconduct. After being presented with evidence with regard to this incident, this hearing body will determine if that act occurred and if that act rises to the level of misconduct by an elected official that warrants his removal from office. Elected officials are expected to conduct themselves with integrity. As an elected official, a chosen representative of the people, Commissioner Guest is by definition a leader in this community and is expected to show soundness of character and make decisions that affect all of his constituents. It's a sacred trust or duty, and it should not be taken lightly. Our legislature acknowledged this and provided a statutory mechanism by which this hearing body could guard that sacred trust and ensure that a representative of the people could be involuntarily removed for misconduct. You will hear testimony and be presented with evidence today that Commissioner Guest sent a text message to a city employee that was racially insensitive and offensive, unprofessional, and violated the sanctity and integrity of his position as a representative of the people of the City of Paducah. And perhaps most concerning, he displayed very poor judgment. The display of poor judgment is so concerning because as an elected official, Commissioner Guest must make decisions and exercise personal judgment regularly. And his decisions affect each and every citizen of the City of Paducah. This city has gone to great lengths to acknowledge and promote the diversity and inclusion of all its citizens, including but not limited to those citizens of African American descent. Commissioner Guest's comments in the text messages that you will hear about today are not only offensive, but quite frankly, they're an embarrassment to this city and blatantly disrespectful to its citizens and employees. At the conclusion of the testimony and evidence that is presented to you today, you will be asked to vote as to whether Commissioner Guest should remain in this trusted position as a voice for the people. I'm confident that you will make the right decision and vote for removal.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
I do, Mayor Bray. Mayor Bray, commissioners, Ms. Pettit, members of the public that are here, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to present and be present in these proceedings. For you that don't know me, my name's David Riley, and I'm joined by my law partner, Ben Stewart, here this evening. This is a matter of great importance, one to which you've devoted your substantial time, consideration, and attention. I want to say thank you for that. No one present here relishes having to be here and to do this. No one desired for this proceeding to culminate in this public hearing. No one desired for a man's life to be displayed on the public, to be drugged through the public, to be called a racist and a bigot. No one on this commission wanted him to be called those things, and yet that is what has occurred to him. Because of that, this public hearing has become necessary for its important political and personal matters that are at issue. Unlike other places in the world, one of the great hallmarks of our society is that from the top to the bottom, the government is not permitted to do things in darkness. No matter how uncomfortable this proceeding may be, no matter the implications of it for me, for Mr. Guest, for the public, for the city, for the commissioners and the mayor, we require the laws to be applied openly and fairly. This proceeding is no different. Another hallmark of our society that distinguishes us from so many other places is the right to defend yourself with the assistance of competent counsel. Regardless of what you may think or might not think of Mr. Guest's actions on November the 8th, 2022, maybe you would have said them differently. Maybe you wouldn't have said them at all. Maybe I would have been more articulate in what I meant. But no matter what that might have been, his right to defend himself and to have counsel that will ensure he's treated fairly and appropriately, and that the board's decision is based on the law and not political whim or the demands of a few, is a near sacred responsibility to me. It's something I've lost sleep on in preparing for these proceedings. I won't lie to you. I'm just 37 years old, and it sure is intimidating to sit at this council and sit before a board of people that I trust, admire, and respect, and ask you not to overturn the results of a free and fair election. But that's my goal this evening, and I hope to achieve that through the proof that you will be presented. The board has charged Mr. Guest with a single count of misconduct in the performance of the duties of his office under KRS 838040. This charge arises from an approximate 10-minute window of time on November 8th, 2022. Just 10 minutes. In that time, Mr. Guest sent text messages to Mr. Greg Cherry, our deputy fire chief. I will demonstrate to you that Mr. Guest's actions across that briefest window were not misconduct within the meaning of the statute. Rather, you will hear that his actions arose from and were prompted by day-long complaints related to other candidates' violations of the city's election ordinance ordinance. You won't hear any evidence that other candidates did not violate and were in violation of that regulation on the day of the election. Everyone will agree that they were violated. You will hear that Mr. Guest's comments came on a single occasion on a 10-minute window of time, and only after city employees and other members of this board informed Mr. Guest that other candidates had accused him of violating the same ordinances, and that Mr. Guest was receiving so-called special treatment simply because of his position as a commissioner at that time. That is simply not true. You will hear that Mr. Guest's text messages were only sent after members of this board instructed Mr. Cherry to remove the other candidate's sign, prompting the other candidate to become frustrated with the city government and to level his unfounded accusations at Mr. Guest and to others. If, after hearing this evidence, you believe Mr. Guest's actions were still misconduct under the statute, something that we all agree is not defined and we've been given little, if any, guidance on from the state legislature, you will hear evidence that Mr. Guest's actions were not in the performance of the duties of his office, the second question you must answer in order to convict him under the charges leveled against him. You won't hear that Mr. Guest's actions resulted in any city employee doing anything after the communications at issue. This is because his actions had nothing to do with the office of commissioner he held at that time. And the board, because he did not act within the duties attendant to the office of the commissioner, has no power to remove him this evening. There are always times when we as human beings, and people doing the very best we can in the positions we've been given, either by the opportunities we've been given in life or the election of our fellow citizens, we always say or do things we regret and would immediately take back if possible. We are not robots predestined on some course by the ones and zeros of our programming. We are subject to mistakes, and it makes us human. But even when we make them, our mistakes don't mark us with a scarlet letter or brand us with an unremovable scar, particularly when the momentary deviation is inconsistent with the track record of our lives. We cannot develop, live in, or promote a society where momentary mistakes are the only evidence permitted to forever define a person's character and conduct. Such is the case with Mr. Guest and the decision before you this evening. It is exceptionally easy to level accusations of racism or bigotry against someone. These are powerful words that by their mere accusation have the ability to destroy a person's reputation forever. It's an entirely different matter to prove it, and that's the special prosecutor's burden here this evening. She wants you to put blinders on and to microscopically judge David Guest solely for 10 minutes of his life on November the 8th, 2022. She doesn't want anything else to be placed on the scales, and I ask you to reject this proposition. In carrying out the charge against Mr. Guest and hearing the evidence, you are in the unenviable position of both being judge and jury against one of your fellow members. It is a heavy burden, and the ultimate question for you is whether you will overturn the votes of over 3,000 people who voted for Mr. Guest in November. The evidence you will hear will not support such an action, and I respectfully ask you to refrain from it. I want to offer my special thanks to Ms. Blankenship, Ms. Pettit, and to the city clerk for their great work in making this process as smooth and to operate as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Ms. Pettit, you may call your first witness.
We call David Guest.
Sure can.
Before you sit, let me swear you in. If you'll please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Good afternoon, Mr. Guest. How are you?
Fine.
I'm going to hand you what was marked as Exhibit 1 at the beginning of this proceeding. Ask that you take a moment and look that over. It's 2 pages.
Oh, I see. Sorry, I was looking under. I didn't,
That's
didn't
okay.
think that was a period on the
Yeah,
end, so I'm
that's
sorry.
okay.
Okay.
Have you seen that document before?
Not unless I looked at it right there when you.
Okay. I'll represent to you that the item that has been previously introduced as Exhibit 1 is the resolution of the Board of Commissioners of the city that was entered on December the 15th. And the Exhibit 1, the resolution, sets forth the charges against you. Do you have an understanding of what the charges against you are today?
Yes, I do.
Okay. The charges as set forth in Exhibit 1 on November 8, 2022, and I'm right there at the bottom of that first page, Mr. Guest, if you want to follow along with me. Commissioner David Guest sent text messages to a city employee about an African-American city commission candidate, which included language with racial undertones, stating, quote, "You got DeJuan under control," end quote, and, open quote, "Whitey keeping a black man down," end quote. Section 2 says that there is probable cause to believe that in sending these text messages, Commissioner David Guest engaged in misconduct in the performance of his duties of his office. Section 3, that Commissioner Guest is hereby charged with misconduct pursuant to KRS 83A.040 subsection 9, and that pursuant to KRS 83A.040 subsection 9, Commissioner Guest is entitled to a full public hearing before the Board of Commissioners to be scheduled in the near future. Do you understand those charges against you to be accurate and why we are here today?
Yes.
You are currently a commissioner for the City of Paducah, correct?
Yes.
When were you first elected to that position?
Have to get my years straight. It was 18 years ago. I was on for 2 terms, and then I was then 2 years ago.
What are your duties and responsibility as a commissioner as you understand them?
As I learned my kind of first 2 phrases, I guess I'll leave it at 2 phrases that Mr. Zumwalt, who was the city manager, said there's power in 3. With 3 votes, you can sell City Hall, and without 3, you have no power. And Mr. Coleman used to Robert Coleman, sorry, who's commissioner. We're the hiring and firing.
What does "we are the hiring and firing" mean?
That's what, in a city manager form of government, that's what the commission, the board, is responsible for.
Did you ever hear the phrase "lead by example"?
No. I mean, not in the city. I mean, have I heard that from my mother or Sunday school teacher or something? Yeah, probably.
Sure. Is that something that you believed in, lead by example?
Sure.
Part of your duties, at least what I understood them to be, and you correct me if I'm wrong, part of your duties is to vote to enact ordinances. Is that correct?
We vote on ordinances, yes.
And work with city officials and employees to make sure those ordinances are enforced.
we work with the city manager. I don't know if we work with city employees per se, but yes.
Okay. Well, I think we can probably agree city manager is a city employee.
Oh, yes, I'll go with that. But
Fair.
to say I go meet with the police officers or the firemen or whatever.
Well, sure. And how do you go about communicating with city employees, the city manager, to make sure that the ordinances are enforced, to make sure that the city is running smoothly? What are your primary methods of communication to do so?
I have a phone call with the city manager once a week. He keeps me up to breast with any kind of legal activity with the police department and what's going on there. But other than, I don't talk to city employees that much. My son's a city employee, but other than that, so.
One would hope that you talk to them. In the course and scope of your job duties as a commissioner, do you routinely use text messaging as a form of communication?
With the commissioners? Yes.
In any way? But with the commissioner specifically, you do routinely use that as a form of
Yes,
communication?
yes, with the commissioners, mayor,
Okay.
and the manager.
Sure. I'm going to hand you what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 2 and ask you if you recognize that.
Yes, I do.
Okay. What do you recognize that to be?
My text to Greg Cherry.
Okay. Move to enter that document as Exhibit 2.
No objection.
Put it back. Have you had sufficient opportunity to look at Exhibit 2 there in front of you?
Yes.
Does it appear to be accurate?
Exhibit 2, you're calling this one, this two?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh,
I saw
yes,
A.
this
I saw
whole-
A.
yeah, okay.
Okay, sorry, yes.
Exhibit 2. And you routinely use text messaging as a form of communication. Would this just be an extension of that, using text messaging to communicate with a city employee about enforcing
Will
ordinances?
object to the form of the question.
Yeah, I don't.
Misconstrues his testimony.
I don't talk to city employees. I mean, Greg was a friend, and yes, I have all the commissioners, all the inspectors, I have their phone number, and I talk to them because I do city business. But to say that's how I'm talk to city employees, I mean, because I went and looked at my phone today, I had not talked to him for 4 months, so it's not a daily or weekly thing.
Okay. Well, explain to me why you sent this text message.
It was a poor attempt at humor because I had heard through a text message from another commissioner that Dewan had questioned my signs at another location, and my cousin told me after all this came up, and Commissioner Wilson's heard this. One of my friends told me, he's a cousin, and he said, David, your emotions got you into this. Don't let your emotions get you. And it was at the end of the day, I worked all day, and I had heard he had questioned my signs, and I was commenting on something I already knew had happened. And I was talking about election laws. I wasn't talking about, that I've read on social media, and that I was referring to that.
You got Dewan under control, so what did that mean?
It was an election laws.
I'm sorry, was it an election what?
Election laws, following election laws just like we all were.
And why did you text that to Mr. Cherry?
Because I had heard that through a text from Miss Wilson, that Dewan was questioning, he said he was being targeted, and he was questioning why my signs and one of her signs wasn't removed. And I think Buzz's was on there too.
You sent that, let me be a little bit more clear because I don't think we're understanding
Sure.
each other. You sent that to Greg Cherry because Greg Cherry was a city employee that was in charge of policing the signs, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you sent that to Greg Cherry because of his role at the city.
I was making a joke because I knew it had already been done.
So the answer is yes. That's why you sent it to Greg Cherry.
As a jokingly manner, because I knew I was making light of Mr. Thomas's questioning my signs, and he didn't know I owned the building he was questioning of, and that was why I sent it.
I understand what you're saying, but the fact of the matter is that you sent it to Greg Cherry because Greg Cherry is the one who's in charge of policing the sign ordinance in his role as a city employee.
He's over inspections, yes, ma'am.
You didn't send it to Joe on the street or Sally over here. You sent it to Greg because that's his job and his role as a city employee.
Yes, and he had already done it.
If you'll look back at Exhibit 2, I believe that, and that's the text message that's
Okay,
in front
gotcha.
of you. Mr. Cherry responded, he is mad at you, LOL. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. Oh, yes? Mm-hmm. Yes?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're having it stenographically taken down, so I need you to say yeses, okay? And your response to that is what?
Well, after he knew it was a joke, he put LOL. I put Whitey keeping a black man down, and I caught myself immediately but I was referring to that's how it could look for, again, in a jokingly manner, that's how it could look was a white man keeping a black man down for Greg Cherry taking the signs down.
Why did you feel the need to bring race into it?
Again, poor attempt at humor.
But why did you feel the need to bring race into it?
Asked and answered.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, that was just an objection. You may answer, Mr.
Yeah,
Guest.
you just thought that was funny?
It was a, Whitey keeping a black man down is a phrase. And so, yes, I used that phrase, but then I saw immediately, I put sorry, it just came out. I mean, I caught it as being, knew it wasn't the best remark I could have made. And I had not said one thing the whole election, the whole day. That was my first comment the whole day
It's your first comment the whole day.
regarding the election signs.
You hadn't had any other communications the whole day with regard to the sign placement?
The only other text I had was a picture that I took at 8 o'clock at City Hall, at the courthouse.
You hadn't had any other communications with commissioners or anyone about these sign placements?
I had with my, no, I had texted Commissioner Wilson, but no, I don't think I did. I think I heard that from Commissioner Wilson talk to my wife. I'd have to look at my phone. I'm sorry, that's 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
Sure. And you sent this text message to Greg Cherry, a city employee, and you said you already knew that it had been taken care of. How did you know that?
Through my wife, Commissioner Wilson, told my wife.
Okay, and she told you?
My wife told me, yes.
Okay, so you knew the city had already taken care of these things?
Yes, they were.
And you responded with the comment, Whitey keeping a black man down because you thought it was funny?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And there was no other motivation for that? Do you routinely use racially insensitive, funny comments?
If you can find anywhere else I have, no, I hope I don't. No, I don't.
Well,
And-
you
and
said,
that's-
go ahead.
And that's how I saw it could be seen, because Greg Cherry taking another commissioner's signs down. That's how I saw it could be seen.
So you immediately recognized
Mm-hmm.
it as what?
As an insensitive statement.
You immediately recognized it as an inappropriate
Yes.
racial slur.
I didn't say racial. I mean, but yes, it was an inappropriate statement.
Well, if it's not racial, then what does that mean?
It's an inappropriate statement.
Okay, so Whitey keeping a black man down is not a racially insensitive statement.
I would say that could be a racially insensitive statement. Yes, ma'am.
Well, is it or isn't it in your opinion?
Yes.
Okay, so you immediately recognized it as
Yes.
such?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I'm going to hand you what has been marked as Exhibit 3.
Thank you. Oh, Lord.
Ask that you review that.
Oh, yeah, that's my statement.
So you do recognize that?
Mm-hmm.
And you've had a chance to review it?
I haven't seen it in a month or so, but yes, ma'am.
Okay, what does that appear to be, a true and accurate representation of that document?
Yes.
Okay. Move to enter that as Exhibit 3 to this hearing. And Madam Clerk, if you wouldn't mind displaying that, please.
No objection to its submission.
Mr. Guest, go ahead and describe to me what Exhibit 3 is. What is your intent? Well, first of all, let me ask you this. Did you write the words that are displayed on Exhibit 3?
Yes, I did as soon as I left the commission meeting.
Okay. How long after this statement, Whitey keeping a black man down, that's in Exhibit 2, was that? How long after that?
Repeat that?
Yeah, how long after you leaving the commission meeting and writing this was it from the time that you made the statement?
This was
that's in Exhibit
November the
2?
8th.
Okay.
And then this was the 15th? Is that right?
So approximately a week later.
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And what was your intent in publishing this on Facebook, I believe?
Yes, and we called the newspaper, TV6, and said it would be on Facebook because they asked for a response.
Sure. You came up with these words and you typed them in yourself?
Yeah, on my computer.
Okay. And what was your intent?
Right here, I just said, I'm sorry, making a statement. It's just explaining my text.
Is that the first time that you had issued any type of apology?
Other than the immediate sorry on November the 8th.
So in Exhibit 3, if you'll look at the end of the second line there and the beginning of the third line, I said a statement that I immediately saw could be viewed as insensitive. Do you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you view it as insensitive?
Yes.
Okay. You said earlier when you were testifying that in your role as commissioner, one of your job duties is we are the hiring and firing, correct?
I think that's what KRS says in a city manager form of government. That's what we do.
Oh, no, that's what you just said, that's why I'm.
Okay, but yes, I'm
Yeah.
repeating, yes.
We are the
yes.
hiring and firing. If a city employee had made that statement, do you believe they should have been fired?
I don't know, I can't answer that statement.
Well, you're the hiring and firing, you would have gotten a vote.
There's a lot of facts and leading up to it and afterwards and history, usually, if you're on probation for something, then yes, something could be, some little something could throw it over.
Are you aware that the city has adopted a zero tolerance policy with regard to racially insensitive and disparaging
Yes, ma'am.
language? What does that mean to you?
Racial, it's hatred from what they had told me. I think the mayor had said that the two individuals that were removed, fired, not, that they, the person had felt threatened. The other person that was said it to has been threatened. I don't know the examples of those. I don't know who was fired. I don't know, but they felt threatened. I'm pretty sure the mayor told me that when he told me it would be the Tuesday, when he informed me of my text had made public, when him and Darren sat down and showed me, and he said that we had fired two employees,
Okay.
and they had both felt threatened. The other people had felt threatened.
So think I understand your testimony to mean if a city employee makes a racially insensitive or threatening comment and the other person in the presence feels threatened, then they should be involuntarily terminated.
Well, there's a lot, I'm not, there's a lot going, there's a lot of facts and figures that go to that. So I mean, I'm not going to paint with a broad,
Well, sure. Are you aware that you voted to
Yes, ma'am.
fire 2 employees?
yes, ma'am.
Within this last calendar year?
Yes,
The 2
ma'am.
employees that you just referred to?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you voted to fire 2 city employees because they made racially insensitive comments. Is that correct?
And the person felt threatened. Yes.
Answer the question
Yes.
first. Is that correct? You
Yes.
voted. Okay. So it's okay in your mind to fire a city employee if they make a racially insensitive comment and the person in whose presence it is made feels threatened.
That was what it was explained to me, that 2 people had felt threatened.
Okay.
And they were on probation. Yes.
Yes, and so you voted to fire them.
Yes, ma'am.
What if they had felt uncomfortable?
I guess that's a whole nother
Would you
story.
have
We'd have
voted to
to-
fire them if they had felt uncomfortable?
we would probably follow the city managers. You have to ask the city manager then. I mean,
Right.
we usually go with city manager.
Right. So if a city employee had made a racially insensitive comment or slur, and the person in whose presence it was made felt harassed, would you have voted to fire them?
I don't know.
But
I know-
threatened, that's when you vote to fire them.
Yes, that was what we have a history of doing. We had the 2-0.
You agree that you were a commissioner for the city of Paducah at the time you sent the text message that is Exhibit 2, correct?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
You agree that you, as sitting city commissioner, sent that text message to Greg Cherry, a city employee,
Yes, ma'am.
correct? And you also agree that the substance of that text message, quote, can be perceived as hurtful and inappropriate, correct?
I was where I got I will say the whitey and black man was an insensitive. The Reverend Henderson was the one that informed me on the under control. I had no idea under control was a coin word, racial. I had zero. And Reverend Henderson agreed that we wouldn't know.
But you knew that, hang on, let me say it, whitey keeping a black man down undisputedly.
Insensitive.
Yes, racially insensitive.
Insensitive, yes, ma'am.
Racially disparaging.
Racially insensitive.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. If a city employee made that exact statement, the person felt threatened or uncomfortable, would you have voted to fire them?
Object to the form, compound question.
Excuse me?
Well,
Sorry,
Mr.
it's a
Guest
com- it's
keeps
a compound
talking about the
question.
scenario, so I'm giving him all the facts. Okay?
If you would like to ask him a single question instead of conflating the 2 questions that you've asked, please do so.
No, I'm going to ask that question. So do we need a ruling?
You've asked for threatened and, I forget the other one, there was an or in there. They're the 2 separate things that Mr. Guest has testified to.
Right, what I asked was if a city employee had made the exact statement that Commissioner Guest made, whitey keeping a black man down, and the person in the city employee's presence felt threatened, would he have voted to fire them?
But there was nothing in what I said was threatening. Nothing what I said was threatening.
In all fairness, Mr. Guest, you don't know what it was because you weren't the recipient of the comment. Can we agree on that?
I know in my heart it wasn't threatened, but okay, yes.
Well, maybe the city employees that you fired for making those comments, in their heart it wasn't threatening either, but they were fired because the people that were in their presence felt threatened. So it's really not up to you to decide if that's threatening, is it?
Okay,
Yes?
yes.
So let's go back to what is marked as Exhibit 1 that should still be on the table there in front of you. And I
Sorry, I
would-
was holding them over.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I'm going to direct you to the bottom of that first page, section 1.
Yes, ma'am.
On November 8, 2022, Commissioner David Guest sent text messages, and you sent the text messages intentionally. We're not saying that you just negligently press send.
No,
Right? Okay.
yes.
So those were intentional. Commissioner David Guest sent text messages to a city employee about an African-American city commission candidate, which included language with racial undertones, stating, "You got DeWan sick, under control, and Whitey keeping a black man down." And you believe that that text that you sent intentionally was improper and offensive, correct?
The second one, the under control, when I did it, no, I had knew zero that it was inappropriate.
Okay, so Whitey keeping a black man down, it is undisputed
I
that.
put it in it's insensitive. I put it in my apology.
Okay, it's insensitive and offensive.
I said insensitive.
You don't agree that it's offensive?
It's insensitive.
Okay. So you voted to involuntarily terminate a city employee for a racial slur in July 2022. Does that sound correct?
Sure.
Okay. And you voted to involuntarily terminate another city employee in September 2022. Is that correct?
Sure.
Okay. So what implies to the city employees does not imply to you. Is that correct?
Well, there's a lot that, my employees, I'm an elected official, my employees are the citizens of Paducah. My employer, but the people that put me in office.
That's right, and that's why we're here.
Right.
Because if you were a city employee, you personally would have voted to fire you for making that, but you're not subject to that because
That's
you're an
what-
elected official, correct?
That's what you said. I didn't say, I said if they were threatened. I never said they were threatened.
You don't know what Greg Cherry was.
You're right, you're right.
You don't know if he was embarrassed, or he felt uncomfortable, or if he felt harassed, or he felt threatened. You don't know.
Well, he put LOL on it, so
Yeah, and we'll hear from him as to what he meant from that. But you don't know how Greg Cherry felt. Can we agree on that?
I guess so, yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So what applies to city employees being fired for making these types of comments doesn't apply to you.
It's KRS takes care. We have a state that all that's in our KRS.
Yeah.
And
I'm
further-
not
and-
asking you to make a legal conclusion,
Okay,
Mr. Guest. I'm asking you that as a leader of this community, you don't hold yourself to the same standard that you hold the city employees to. Isn't that correct?
I don't. I'll stick, there was nothing threatening, and I understand you don't know I don't know what they were feeling, but there was nothing threatening in what I said. And that's why mine is different than the other two.
Just for the record, I'd like to object to this form of question. It has been raised in pre-hearing motions on this issue of whether this so-called standard or zero tolerance policy is applicable, Mr. Guest, and the Commission and Ms. Pettit have agreed that it's not, but still we're asking questions about it. Just so I preserve the record, I would like to have that objection stated.
Right, and just for the record, I made very clear during that comment that I did not in any way imply that Mr. Guest was subject to the zero tolerance policy. I merely asked him if he held himself to the same standard as his employees.
I understand that may be a method of semantics here, but I believe that's what you were
Semantics is our
implying.
job, Mr. Riley. I don't have any further questions for Mr. Guest.
Thank you. Did I
Well-
take- Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Guest, we'll reserve our right to question Mr. Guest until our case in chief.
So you don't have any questions for the witness right now?
Not at this moment. Mr. Bray, we will have the opportunity to question him again if we choose to during his case in chief.
Do the commissioners have any questions?
Okay, yeah, thanks. I was just, you bet.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Riley, you may call your first witness.
No,
Oh, I'm sorry. Where am I?
I get more
Sorry.
Am I done?
for now.
Oh, okay,
You can
Yeah,
step
sure.
away,
You
Mr.
can- You can come over.
Mr.
here.
Guest.
Call it Greg Cherry.
Mr. Cherry, before you sit down, let me swear you in, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Hello, Mr. Cherry, how are you?
All right, how are you?
Could you please state your name for the record?
Joseph Greg Cherry.
Excuse me. And Mr. Cherry, how are you employed?
I'm Deputy Chief of the Fire Prevention Division, City of Paducah Fire Department.
How long have you been employed with the city?
Be 16 years, May 3rd.
In your current capacity, what are your job duties?
I supervise the Fire Marshal's Office, which incorporates building inspections, electrical inspections, code enforcement, property maintenance.
Included in those duties, do you oversee and enforce the placing of signage in the city
Yes, ma'am.
to include election signs?
Yes.
Okay. And were you doing so in November of 2022? Did you function in that role
Yes,
in
yes,
November of
ma'am.
2022?
Yes.
Specifically on November 8th,
Yes, ma'am.
2022? Okay, very good. Did you have communications with Commissioner Guess about signs being placed on November 8th, 2022, or with regard to that election cycle?
Yes.
Okay, what do you recall about those?
Commissioner Guest sent me a text message, asked if, I don't know exact wording of it, if I had Mr. Thomas under control, and I think I responded back that he was mad at him,
Okay,
and that was pretty well.
okay. I'm going to hand you what has been marked as Exhibit 2 to this proceeding. Ask that you take a moment and look at that. See if you recognize
Yes.
that document.
Yes.
What do you recognize that document to
That's a
be?
conversation with me and Commissioner Guest.
Okay. And you refer to him as Commissioner Guest, so in your mind, you were receiving that from a city commissioner, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have reason to know why Commissioner Guest sent that to you?
I'm assuming it was, because there had been some issues about some sign placement earlier in the day that I notified the mayor, city manager about.
Okay. So that was your assumption when you got the initial communication from Commissioner Guest, you got DeJuan under control?
Yes.
And am I correct that your response to that comment is he is mad at you, LOL?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you mean by that?
Mr. Thomas was unhappy with the fact that he accused my department, city, being selective on code enforcement, protecting existing commissioners. And I explained to him that we were not. The only signs that we were concerned about was the ones that were placed on city property.
Okay.
And so he, was accusing Commissioner Guest, Commissioner Wilson of having signs on city-owned property, and I explained to him that he did not. That Commissioner Guest owned the HIP building, that was his property, not city's, and that the one that Commissioner Wilson had, that was not city-owned property on Mayfield Road.
And it doesn't show us on Exhibit 2 how much time passed between the comment you got DeJuan under control and your response to that, or the subsequent dialogue there. But did you receive another text from Commissioner Guest?
Yes.
Okay, and what did that say?
You may read it.
Please.
It says, why are you keeping a black man down? Then
That's two separate messages there, right?
Yes, there's
Okay.
a space in between there.
So Whitey keeping a black man down. What'd you think when you saw that?
I didn't know what to say
Why?
because it violates city policy.
Okay. How did that make you feel, getting that from a city commissioner?
Uncomfortable.
What did you do?
I responded back, no comment. Out of nervousness, I put LOL because I really didn't know what else to say.
And why did it make you feel so uncomfortable?
Because it's a violation of city policy. You know, we don't say stuff like that.
Well, help me out here. When you say we don't say stuff like that, what specifically about that comment was a violation of city policy?
In my opinion, why'd he keeping a black man down?
I'm going to go ahead and ask you, did you perceive that to be a racially insensitive or inappropriate comment?
I would say inappropriate.
And is that why it made you uncomfortable?
Yes.
So you responded no comment, and I believe your testimony was you said LOL because you were uncomfortable.
No, it was kind of a nervous laugh.
Sure. You didn't know how to respond to that from
No.
a city commissioner, did you?
No.
Did you do anything else after you received that text message?
As far as the conversation with him,
No, just anything else in relation to this text message?
I sent it to the fire chief. Then Steve, Kyle, the fire chief, and I called Ms. Blankenship, told her what had happened, and then Steve took it from there and went and met with the city manager and mayor, I think.
Why did you, and this is why people get aggravated with attorneys, because it seems like we ask obvious questions, but why did you send it to Chief Kyle?
He is my supervisor.
And why did you feel like you should send this text message to your supervisor?
Because it's inappropriate, and I didn't know what else to do with it. So, you know, city policy is report to your supervisor.
As a city employee, and I'm not asking you as a human being, but as a city employee, would you ever have sent a text, Whitey keeping a black man down, or some other racially insensitive comment such as that?
No,
Why not?
because it's inappropriate.
What do you think will happen to you?
Well, city policy is you'd be terminated.
Did it make you uncomfortable? I know you've said it made you uncomfortable because David Guest is a city commissioner and he was sending you these text messages. Were you aware that city commissioners at least had some say in hiring and firing you?
Yes.
Is that one of the reasons why it bothered you that a city commissioner had sent you this text message?
Well, I will make sure I have a job, yeah.
No more questions for Mr. Cherry.
Good afternoon, Mr. Cherry. My name's David Riley. I don't think we've ever had the pleasure of meeting before.
No, sir.
Thank you for being here this afternoon in an uncomfortable setting. That's the hottest seat in the room.
Yes, sir.
I guarantee you. I understand it that the fire chief's your daily boss. Is that correct?
Correct.
He's your supervisor,
Right.
correct? Who is above him in the chain of responsibility within the city?
City manager.
Okay. And can you please give me your cell phone number?
559, or 270-559-0365.
Okay. Thank you for doing that. Can you tell me what you did to prepare for your testimony today?
Nothing.
Okay. Did you meet with anyone to prepare for your testimony?
Well, Ms. Pettit is the only one.
Okay, can you tell me what the two of you discussed?
Basically, everything we've just said here today.
Okay, you rehearsed your testimony, is that
No.
correct?
Object to form.
What did you do? What did you discuss with Ms. Pettit?
I really can't say for sure what we discussed. She just kind of went over some of the questions she had, but nothing in particular.
When did you meet with her?
1:30 today.
Today. It's, according to that clock in the back, it's 5 o'clock, approximately 5 o'clock now, so at 1:30 today, you can't remember what the two of you discussed, is
It
that
was
correct?
very in general conversation. I mean, there was no particulars about anything.
You didn't even talk about this proceeding or what your
Well,
testimony would be?
she went over how it was going to go, you know, how we'd be setting, how many witnesses would be called, that we'd be sitting in the other room. She, well, just reviewed the questions that she was going to ask me.
Did she present you with any documents to
No.
review? Okay. Did she tell you how to respond to any particular
No.
questions? Okay. Prior to 4:29 PM on November the 8th, 2022, that's Election Day, the most recent Election Day, did you have any other contact with Mr. David Guess?
No,
Just to be clear, you didn't have any phone calls with him that day?
no.
Didn't have any emails with him that day?
I don't recall any emails.
Didn't have any in-person conversations with him that day?
One, it was not in person, but Commissioner Guest was putting a sign up over in the courthouse parking lot. I went by, waved, him and his wife, he was getting out of his truck, and that was about it.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Fair to say then that the first time that you had any direct communication with Mr. Guess, all of Election Day, was as shown on Exhibit Number 2, 4:29 PM.
Yes.
Before Election Day, did you ever have any conversations with Mr. Guess about enforcement or interpretation of the city's election sign ordinance?
Election signs?
Yes, sir.
I don't recall. I'm not going to say we did or didn't. I don't recall.
Okay. Before November 8th, 2022, did you have any conversations, communications of any type with Mr. DeJuan Thomas regarding the city's election sign ordinances?
Prior to when, I'm sorry?
Prior to Election Day?
We did with the past election, not this current one, but the one 2 years prior.
Sure, I guess when he was running for mayor, I
Yes,
believe, at
correct.
that time. Okay, but with the current election or
No.
the most recent election, no?
Not that I recall.
Before 4:30, more or less, on November the 8th, 2022, did you have any conversations or text messages with Mr. Thomas regarding David Guess?
No.
No conversation, no text messages with Mr. Thomas?
I didn't even have Mr. Thomas's cell phone number till here recently, and it was an unrelated issue.
Okay. No other communications regarding David Guess with Mr. Thomas on
No.
Election Day?
No.
None whatsoever?
None.
Isn't it true that Mr. Thomas called you on Election Day to complain about David Guess's signs?
Yes, on election day he did, yes.
That was, right.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question.
Yeah, sorry, that's fine. And so on Election Day, Mr. Thomas called you to complain about David Guess's signs, correct?
Well, he called because he was upset that we had removed 2 of his signs from city-owned property, one being across the street here at the fountain and the other one at the entrance to the flood wall. And so he called to complain about that we was targeting him, not, and that's, as I said earlier, he was bringing up Commissioner Gass, Commissioner Wilson having illegal signs. But other than that, no.
What did you interpret it to mean when Mr. Thomas complained about the city, quote, targeting him?
That we was doing selective enforcement, letting other commissioners getting by with putting signs in inappropriate places, and we wasn't letting him.
Okay. Were other commissioners targeting Mr. Thomas on Election Day?
No.
Directive form.
I'm sorry.
Calls for hearsay
Sure. I don't think that's hearsay.
and speculation.
Did you have conversations with other commissioners or members of this commission on Election Day regarding Mr. Thomas's signs?
Yes,
Before 4:30 PM?
yes.
Who?
Commissioner Wilson.
At what time?
Around 2:30, give or take.
Do you recall the contents of that conversation with her? Can you please recount that for us?
Okay, well, first of all, the mayor, I notified the mayor that Mr. Thomas was unhappy. And I notified him because I knew Mr. Thomas was going to be calling the mayor, so I just want to give the mayor heads up. Prior to that, or after that, I can recount the whole day if you want. I took off, only worked half a day that day, took half a day vacation. I went to Menards. City manager called while I was in Menards, wanting to know why Mr. Thomas was upset. So I informed him while what had happened. About 2:30, Commissioner Wilson called, wanted to know why he was upset, and I explained to her that he was upset with her and Commissioner Guest about signs as I've stated earlier, on Old Mayfield Road and the one at Tip Building.
Do you recall any conversations with Mayor Bray on Election Day regarding
This-
any candidate's election signs?
That morning, he was one that received the complaints about signs being placed on city-owned property.
Did either Mayor Bray or Commissioner Wilson give you any directions regarding Mr. Thomas's or any other candidates' election signs displayed on Election Day?
No, I mean, the only thing the mayor, we discussed was the fact that they were on city-owned property. That's it.
Was that a violation of the city's sign
Yes.
ordinance? On Election Day, did you ever find or investigate or determine any of Mr. Guess's signs that were in violation of the city
I never
ordinance?
went and looked.
Okay, you just never went and looked,
Well, like I said, I only worked half a day, so I didn't.
even after Mr. Thomas complained about it?
I knew where the one that he was referring to, Commissioner Guest, I knew where it was.
Okay.
So I knew it was in compliance, and then the one Commissioner Wilson had, I passed by it every day, so I knew where it was too, so I knew it was in compliance.
Okay. Mr. Cherry, isn't it true that on Election Day that Mr. Guess never asked you to remove any candidate's sign at any time?
No.
That's not true?
No,
Or
he did not ask me to remove any signs.
So it's true that he did not direct you, sorry, he did not ask you to
No,
remove
he
any
did
signs,
not.
correct?
No.
Did he direct you to remove any signs of any candidates?
No,
Okay. Did he order you to remove any
No.
candidate's particular signs?
no.
Isn't it true, Mr. Cherry, that by the time you were contacted by Mr. Guest beginning at 4:30, that all the signs in controversy had already been removed?
Yes.
Mr. Cherry, I'd like next to turn to what's been marked as Exhibit 2 to this hearing, which is the text messages at issue. And I'd also like to present you with a copy. Can you confirm for me that the copy in front of you is your version of that, what you received, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to present to you what I believe we can mark as Exhibit 4 to this proceeding. I'm going to show you it's the version of this from Mr. Guess's perspective. I have another copy of that also that's available as needed.
Just for the record, I don't think that this version has been previously presented. I perceive the only difference from Exhibit 2 is the times. Yes. I don't believe that this version has been previously exchanged or identified, but the only difference is the time. So I won't object to it being introduced.
It's been previously produced in our exhibit disclosures. And in response to the city's open records request. Thank you. Mr. Cherry, can you review Exhibit 2 and Exhibit 4 for me, please?
The only difference is I see this one has timestamps on it.
Sure. And are you aware that you can slide your phone, the messages back and forth, and reveal the times in which they're sent? You aware of that?
No.
Okay, that's fine. I want to. I want to do my best, Mr. Cherry, to try to break down and understand the content of these text messages and how you understood and how you interpreted them. The best we can. I know that we're doing hindsight here, so we'll do the best we can with it. So initially, you received a text message from Mr. Guess. I'll do my very best. You received a text message from Mr. Guess at 4:29 p.m. Regarding Mr. Thomas, correct?
Correct.
Do you dispute that you responded immediately at 4:29 p.m.?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I did.
Okay. And can you help us understand again what you meant in your first initial response to Mr. Guess at 4:29 p.m.?
Object is asked and answered.
You may proceed.
Mr. Riley, the commission does not have a copy of that, and I don't think they can see
Oh, sorry.
what you've done there. Did you give a copy of it to the clerk so that one could be displayed?
I believe that's in our exhibit disclosure. Mr. Cherry, when you received the text message from Mr. Guess at 4:29 p.m., you got DeJuan under control. Did you in any way take that to be a racist comment?
No.
Did you in any way take that to be an insensitive comment?
No.
Okay. And then you immediately responded, he's mad at you, LOL, correct? At that time, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, the only reason I ask is we're transcribing
Okay,
this, so
sorry.
we have to get a verbal transcript for it.
Sure.
So let me display the other one. When you're saying he's mad at you, you're referring to Mr. Thomas being mad at Mr. Guest for having his signs on the wrong property or in the incorrect place, correct?
Correct.
Which wasn't true.
Correct.
Okay. And you were saying that in a joking manner, correct?
Correct.
It's like one of those things where it's like you're shaking your head, like, I can't believe I'm having to deal with this. He's mad at you. Is that correct?
It was, yeah, I mean, I was off work. I was trying to do some stuff at home. I did a quick response. I'm not at work. Leave me alone.
Sure, I understand.
So,
And then Mr. Guest then texts you again the next series of text messages, beginning at 4:39 p.m. He texts you Whitey keeping a black man down.
mm-hmm.
You can confirm for me that's at 4:39 p.m., correct?
Correct.
And then at 4:40 p.m., he sent his apology, correct?
Correct.
When you were looking at your phone, had you had an opportunity to see Mr. Guess's first comment, why'd he keeping a black man down, before he sent his apology?
Yeah, I seen it first.
Okay, well, sorry, I guess in the order,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But did his apology come immediately after he sent the text message?
Apparently so, yes.
Okay, based on the timestamps,
Based on
right?
the time, yes.
Right. Because you were looking at your phone and you were able to respond no comment, correct? LOL. At the same time, Mr. Guest had sent his apology, correct?
Correct.
You recognize that Mr. Guest immediately apologized for this comment.
Apparently so.
Do you have any doubt about the sincerity or the genuineness of his apology?
Object calls for speculation.
I can ask him.
Am I answering yes or no?
You're answering what you believe to be the truthful answer.
Did you have any doubt about the sincerity or genuineness of the apology that Mr. Guest issued immediately and before you even had an opportunity to respond?
I guess he was sincerely apologizing, yes.
If Mr. Guest's text message had stopped with the first, you got DeJuan under control, would we even be here today?
Object calls for speculation.
If Mr. Guest's text messages had stopped at 4:29 p.m. when he texted you, you got DeJuan under control, would you have reported that to the fire chief?
No.
The only reason you reported to the fire chief is because of the second text message, "Why are you keeping a black man down?" Is that correct? Okay. Do you know what the racial pejorative is in Mr. Guess's text message at 4:39 p.m.? Why do you keeping a black man down?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
Do you know what the racial pejorative is in that text message?
I don't understand what you're asking for sure.
Okay, that's fine. As I understood your testimony earlier, and I actually wrote it down, you interpreted this text message that Mr. Guess made at 4:39 p.m. as being insensitive, correct?
Correct.
Did you feel threatened by that text message in any way?
What do you mean threatened?
Oh, did you feel like you were, your job was at danger by receiving this text message from Mr. Guess?
I felt like that if I received that text message and did not report it, then my job could be on the line.
Okay. Did you, because of the city's zero tolerance policy?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that that policy doesn't apply to Mr. Guess?
No.
Okay, you're not aware of that, are you?
No.
I asked you a series of questions about whether you did anything in response to receiving these text messages. Did you direct any city employee to do anything on Mr. Guess's behalf or anyone else's behalf as a result of receiving these text messages?
On what?
Sure. For example, after receiving this text message, even though your testimony was, "I didn't do anything," did you call any of your subordinates, people below you?
After this text message?
Yes, sir.
No.
Okay. Didn't do anything?
No.
Okay. Didn't ask them to go remove Mr. Thomas's?
Well, they were off work already.
Okay. 4:30 p.m., they're off work.
Right.
Election day's at a close, correct? On November 8th, 2022, could anyone contact you with complaints about the placement and location of candidates' election signs?
They could call the office number, yes.
And in fact, they did, correct?
Well, the mayor called,
Okay. And Mr. Thomas called, right?
yes.
All right. Can you recall anyone else that called that day to complain about the placement of election signs?
No.
Do you recall Mr. Thomas making any threats to you while on the phone when you spoke with him?
I haven't went back and listened to that phone conversation. I don't recall any specific threats. He was, other than he was accusing us of a selective code enforcement, and I think his exact words were protecting current commissioners.
You certainly wouldn't put your job on the line to protect current commissioners or any commissioner, correct?
Correct.
Isn't it true, Mr. Cherry, as we sit here today, that Mr. Thomas is still in violation of the city's election ordinance signs? Or its ordinance?
I object, and I would ask for a ruling by the Board of Commissioners. I don't know where this is going or how this is in any way relevant to the proceeding today.
Mr. Thomas still has signs out.
There's an objection pending.
Okay, I'll overrule, but I'm going to allow only one question.
As we sit here today, Mr. Cherry, Mr. DeJuan Thomas is still in violation of the city's election sign ordinance because he still has election signs up in and around the city. Isn't that correct?
There possibly could be a couple unless they've been removed in the last 3 or 4 days.
Okay. But up until at least 3 or 4 days ago, he would still be in violation.
That was one question.
One question.
That's fine, I understand. Mr. Cherry, I appreciate your testimony here, your patience with this proceeding, and being willing to come and be part of it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
I have a few more questions.
Proceed.
Mr. Cherry, Mr. Riley, when he was asking you questions initially, asked if you met with me today. Did I ask to meet with you?
I think you did, yes.
Did Mr. Riley ask to meet with you?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Is there anything about our meeting today that changed how you testified in any way, shape, or form?
No.
Mr. Riley asked you a question about the last communication that is on Exhibit 4 and Exhibit 2, actually, where Commissioner Guess said, "Sorry, it just came out. I haven't said one thing the whole election or any day that I'm alive." He asked you to interpret whether Commissioner Guess was sincerely apologizing, and I wrote it down. You said, "I guess he was sincerely apologizing." You don't know if he was sincerely apologizing or just trying to cover his tracks, do you?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
You don't know what his intent was.
I think he was apologizing, but
But you don't know what Commissioner Guess's
No.
intent was with that comment, correct?
correct.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
One brief follow-up, if I may. Mr. Cherry, have you always found your communications prior to this with Mr. Guest to be respectful in tone?
Yes.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Do you want to keep him for recall, or is he released?
I don't have any more questions for Mr. Cherry. He can be released.
May Mr. Cherry be released?
You're free to go.
Thank you.
Ms. Pettit, your next witness.
Yes. Call Stephanie Wilcox.
And while Ms. Wilcox is making her appearance, I just want to reiterate on the record my objection to her testimony. I understand the board's rulings with her testimony, but just for the purpose of preserving my record, I would object to her testimony regarding the city's zero tolerance policy.
Hang on. Okay.
Ms. Wilcox, before you have a seat, can I swear you in, please? Yes. Could you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Could you please state your name for the record?
Stephanie Wilcox.
And Ms. Wilcox, are you employed by the City of Paducah?
Yes, ma'am.
What is your job title?
Human Resources Director.
In your capacity as Human Resources Director, just generally tell us what you do.
Everything related to HR, so recruitment, benefits, risk management falls within the department here as well. Employee relations, policies.
Do you make recommendations for hiring and firing?
Yes.
And what is the city's stance on employees making racially insensitive or inappropriate racial statements?
The city has taken a zero tolerance stance.
And can you please explain what that means?
Well, when it's reported, we investigate the instances to see if there's validity to it, and then come up with our action, our disciplinary action.
You said that you investigate to see if there is validity to it. So does that mean you conduct an investigation to see if the complaint is substantiated?
Yes.
Okay. And how long has the zero tolerance policy, as you phrased it, how long has that been in effect or in practice?
Since July of 2022.
And since it has been in effect, the zero tolerance policy since July of 2022, Have there been any terminations, involuntary terminations of city employees?
Yes.
I'm going to hand you what I have marked as Exhibit 6. And I'm going to ask if you recognize that document.
Yes.
What do you recognize that to be?
This is a disciplinary action for the first termination related to a racial slur.
And I will point out to you, Ms. Wilcox, that we have redacted Exhibit 6 to protect the identity of the employee involved, since that's not germane to this action. So I'd ask that you refrain from using that employee's name. Does what I have marked as Exhibit 6 appear to be an accurate copy of a document that is maintained by your office?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Move to enter Exhibit 6. You could go ahead and put it up, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Riley, you have a response?
Sure, no objections other than those previously stated in my filings and on this record.
All right. Have you had a chance to review Exhibit 6?
Yes.
Does that help you remember the circumstances giving rise to this particular, I think, counseling or disciplinary action?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What do you recall about that?
This happened this past summer in July. It was brought to our attention that an employee had made a racial slur both in July, and then it came, in looking into it, it came to our attention that it had previously happened in November of 21 as well.
Is it fair to say that the only incident that was investigated by your department is the latter, the one in July of
Correct.
2022?
Yes.
Do you recall any other specifics about this particular incident?
I do. It was an employee that made a written complaint regarding the racial slur, and when we asked the employee about it, he did not deny making those statements.
So the employee that the racial slur was attributed to, the employee that made the racial slur, did not deny that he made
Correct.
that statement?
Yes.
Okay. So he acknowledged that it was a racially insensitive statement and admitted making it?
Correct.
And what was the recommendation and/or employment action that resulted from that employee making a racially insensitive comment and admitting that he did so?
Termination.
I'm going to hand you next you have already been handed next what I marked as Exhibit 7. Please just take a moment, look over that, and see if that looks familiar to you.
Yes.
What do you recognize that document to be?
A termination notice.
And does that document appear to be an accurate copy of a document that is maintained in your office?
Yes.
Move to enter this as Exhibit 7.
No objection other than those previously stated.
Do you mind putting that up, Madam Clerk? Ms. Wilcox, could you please reference Exhibit 7 and tell me what you recall about the incident giving rise to, I believe this is a termination notice?
There was an employee who confided in another employee about statements that were being made that he found to be inappropriate and harassment in nature. And we investigated into the statements. There were 5 witnesses that we interviewed. And after completion, we had determined that there were in fact inappropriate and harassing statements made with racial connotations.
Sure. I'm going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 2. to this proceeding. I'm going to direct you to the statement. We'll go ahead and review the entire document. I don't want to take it out of context for you.
Okay.
Do you see in the middle of the page the phrase "Whitey keeping a black man down"?
Yes.
In your capacity as Human Resources Director for the City of Paducah, comporting with the city's zero tolerance policy, if a city employee had made that statement to another city employee, would you recommend termination?
We object to the form of the question. It lacks a foundation and calls for expert testimony.
Can you answer the question?
Yes.
Do you know if you would recommend termination?
Yes.
You would.
Yes.
No more questions?
Good afternoon, Ms. Wilcox. Thank you for being here and for, as I've told other witnesses, being in the hottest seat in the room. It's uncomfortable, and I appreciate your willingness and your ability to be here today.
Thank you.
A couple of questions to follow up on the exhibits you were just presented. In Exhibit 6 before you, that's the one that has the handwriting on it. Do I understand your testimony that this particular employee, based on the investigation that you conducted and others with you, found out that this employee had twice made these racial slurs, correct?
Correct.
What were the slurs?
It was the use of the N-word.
Okay. So this employee had at least twice used the N-word in reference to another city employee, correct?
It wasn't necessarily in reference to, it was in just him talking.
And how did the use of that slur come to be reported to your office? I guess, in other words, who reported it to you?
The supervisor.
Okay. We're in the Public Works Department, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then your office undertook an investigation and determined that based on the use of those slurs on multiple occasions, that the city does not tolerate this sort of language. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in this particular situation, this employee that was terminated was verbally admonished and given a warning about that use of that language, correct?
He was in the first one. However, we weren't aware of that until the July incident.
Okay. I had written down that this, it's been referenced to this as zero tolerance policy, went into effect in July of this year, correct?
Correct.
And this employee was terminated based on use of the N-word, which I think we can all agree is a abhorrent language. And that was he or she used it on July 5th, 2022, correct?
Correct.
Is this the first person to be terminated under this policy?
Yes.
If I wanted to go read that policy, where would I find it?
You wouldn't?
Is it reduced to writing?
No.
Okay. Does it have a list of words that you can or cannot say as a city employee?
In our progressive discipline policy, there are other items that we can term for, which is where this came from.
Sorry, okay, when you say term for, you mean terminated.
Termination.
Yeah, sorry, we're talking about terms, racial terms versus.
Sorry,
Yeah,
termination.
I understand. But if I wanted to go look for a list of words I can or cannot say as a city employee, those aren't written down, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And if I want to go as a city employee and inform myself of what this zero tolerance policy is, it's also not written down, is it?
No.
Whose job is it then to come up to apply this unwritten policy that doesn't give any directions on what to do?
Multiple people
Okay. And how do you go about doing that?
with the city manager, with the directors involved.
You all get together and talk it out and decide if you believe it's racially insensitive or terminable or not?
Yes.
What training have you had to determine whether the words that a person uses are racially insensitive?
Training that we provided city employees.
Training that you provided?
I did not, the city provided.
Okay. How often does that, since this policy went into effect in July of 2022, how often has that training been provided?
Once.
Okay, one time. Okay.
That was citywide.
Citywide.
What department trainings happen, I'm not always aware of.
Let's turn over to Exhibit 7. I'm beginning on the second line of the italics paragraph. After an investigation was completed, it was determined that inappropriate racial connotations have been made by you, and these statements were found to be offensive by others. As I understand it, there were multiple statements made. The word is you, it's got your signature there, so you presumably wrote the letter. It said these statements, were there multiple statements made?
Yes.
Okay, what was the slur or racial connotations made in this situation?
This was related to your people, you people.
And in that context, did you understand, was this a white employee or a black employee that was terminated?
A white employee.
Okay, and when they used the phrase "you people," that white employee used that phrase, who was it in reference to? Who were the "you people"?
An African-American employee.
Okay. And I forgot to ask you on Exhibit 6. I'm sorry, I apologize for going back and forth on this. Was this employee that was terminated white?
Yes.
Okay. The employee that was terminated on Exhibit 7, there's a reference here that talks about this just during a probationary period. Was this a new hire?
Yes.
Okay. Someone that in their probationary period was subject to any number of rules and regulations, correct?
Correct.
And they could be terminated for violating any of those rules or regulations that apply during that probation period.
Yes.
Ms. Wilcox, as you can see, I've got a display here of the text messages at issue. The first text message from Mr. Guess at 4:29 p.m. on Election Day, you got DeJuan under control. In your training, experience, and work as a HR manager, do you recognize that to be any type of racial slur or have racial connotations?
Not in the first line.
Okay, sure. That's what I'm particularly asking about. Ms. Wilcox, do you agree with me, as counsel for the board has stated in writing, that as an elected official, the zero tolerance policy doesn't apply to Mr. Guess?
As an elected official, no.
Okay. I mean, for example, Mr. Guess you can't come to him and terminate him, or the city manager can't come and terminate him, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Wilcox, have you ever been asked to determine what standard applies when determining whether to remove a city commissioner from office?
Object to the extent that it calls for a legal conclusion. She's just testified she can't remove a city commissioner, so what possibly could she say with regard to that issue?
I'm just asking her whether she's ever been asked to.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Have you ever been asked to determine what standard applies when determining whether a city commissioner can be removed from office?
No.
Okay. Have you ever been taught or instructed on that topic?
No.
You ever attended any classes or training on it?
Object to this continued line of questioning. I would ask for a ruling. Ms. Wilcox is the city HR director. She's not a lawyer.
You can answer the last question, then we'll move on.
All right. Is it fair to say then that you don't know what the standard is for removing a city commissioner?
That is correct.
Ms. Wilcox, in your role as the HR director, are you in charge of or the head of any of the city's particular priorities that have been enacted in 2022?
Yes.
Okay. And which of those priorities are you the head of?
I don't know that I'm a particular head of, but I'm involved in the Minority Inclusion Initiative.
To your knowledge, is that initiative that Mr. Guest voted in favor of?
To my knowledge, yes.
Do you have any knowledge that he voted against it?
I do not.
Isn't it true, Ms. Wilcox, that no single city commissioner has the power to hire or fire anyone?
That is correct.
Ms. Wilcox, to your knowledge, has the city ever received any awards from the local chapter of the NAACP regarding its work for the minority inclusion initiative that you've talked about?
I don't know.
You don't know whether the city has or not?
No.
Okay. Appreciate your patience here this evening. I think those are all the questions I have.
I'm sorry, I have a few more questions. Just bear with me. I wanted to make sure that I clarified a few of the issues that Mr. Riley asked you about with regard to Exhibit 6. It is true that as reflected in that document and at your independent recollection that that particular employee had likely engaged in a couple of incidents that were inappropriate and would have resulted in termination. Is that fair?
Yes.
But your office was not aware of either of those until the second one was reported.
That is correct.
So when Mr. Riley was questioning you about the city's zero tolerance policy, but the fact that this individual had had at least 2 incidents, your testimony, and I wrote it down, was, I quote, "We weren't aware of it until the July incident."
Correct.
Do you have independent recollection or knowledge of that first incident in, you think Exhibit 6 says November 2021? Do you know what racial slur was used?
Yes.
Okay. What was that?
The N-word as well.
Again? Okay. So under the city's zero tolerance policy, had you known about that, that would have been a terminable offense as well.
Yes.
But you didn't know about it until July of 2022.
Correct.
Thank you. So when Mr. Riley asked you about that first incident and said he was only, I don't know if it's a he or she, that employee was only verbally admonished and given a warning, that's because your office didn't know about the first incident, correct?
That is correct.
And with regard to Exhibit 7, I believe your testimony was that there were multiple statements.
Yes.
And I want to clarify, multiple statements, my reading of this document is during one incident.
Correct.
And there has been some reference made to the training, the sensitivity training that was administered to all the city employees.
Yes.
And is that called diversity, equity, and inclusion training?
Correct.
Do you have a general understanding, and can you tell the Board of Commissioners what the intent was or what that taught the employees?
Yes, that was a training that focused on through the lens of others, so understanding everyone's background and the differences between them.
And it wasn't just city employees that participated in that training, was it?
No.
Okay, who else participated in that training?
Elected officials,
Do you independently recollect if Commissioner Guest participated in that training?
I do have a sign-in sheet where he attended the training.
And that was well before November of 2022, I presume.
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
A couple of points of clarification, Ms. Wilcox. Did either incident described on Exhibit 6 or Exhibit 7 involve a confrontation between employees?
A confrontation? No.
Okay. Like, I would say more than just an exchange of words, a heated argument, a threat of violence of any type.
No.
But these slurs that are referenced in Exhibits 6 and 7, they were made directly to, by a white person, directly to a person of another race. Is that correct? A black person?
No, that is not correct.
Okay. Sorry. Help me understand that then. I misunderstood what I thought I heard you say.
They were in relation, the November incident was him telling a story referring to African Americans by the N-word. And in July, it was hot out and he made a statement using the N-word to a white employee who came forward with it.
Okay. And what about Exhibit 7?
Exhibit 7, what is it?
Sorry. Just help me understand. I'm trying to understand the context of the statements that were made by the employee in Exhibit 7.
So it was a white employee talking to an African-American employee about your people not being good swimmers, your people not shaving their face every day, your people being able to work out very little but get built quickly.
And that was directly to an African American employee.
Yes, sir.
At any time, did you interpret or did your investigation find that any of these people were actually threatened with any type of violence?
No.
Okay. Mr. Guest stands before the board tonight because of using the phrase "whitey keeping a black man down." It's reported on at 4:39 p.m. on Election Day. What is the racial pejorative in that text message at 4:39?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
Yeah, well, using your experience as the HR director, can you help me understand let me ask it another way. Do you perceive that text message at 4:39 p.m. to be insensitive?
Yes.
Okay. What is insensitive about it based on your experience as the city's HR director?
It's inappropriate,
Okay. What is inappropriate about it?
the racial connotation.
Okay. Help me understand what the racial connotation is.
Referring to a white person keeping a black person down.
Okay. Is using the words black man, is that racially insensitive or racist language?
I think you have to look at the whole statement.
Okay. Is using the word whitey a racial slur or racially insensitive?
Potentially, when you look at the whole statement.
Okay. Did you have any part in forming or contributing to the city's unwritten zero tolerance policy?
I was involved in the termination where we decided it was no longer going to be acceptable
Sure.
at the city.
Sure. I'm sorry. Did you have any comment or contribution to its creation?
Involved in the conversations, yes.
Okay. Part of your job as the city's HR director and reviewing these incidents reflected in Exhibits 6 and 7 was to conduct an investigation, correct?
Correct.
Were there any type of public hearings related to these terminations at all for these employees?
No.
Okay. think those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Anything else?
Ms. Wilcox? Yes, I'm sorry, Mayor, one more question. Mr. Riley just asked you several questions about what is offensive about the phrase "whitey keeping a black man down." I've just got one question for you. What's not offensive about that statement? Or anything not offensive about that?
No.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions.
You're free to go. We're finished with Ms. Wilcox, right? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Do you have any more witnesses?
No additional witnesses.
You have no more witnesses?
Correct.
Okay. We're going to take about a 10-minute break. Is that okay? The court reporter's requesting.
We got to take care of the court.
Let's make a 15-minute break, and we'll come back and begin with Mr. Riley's witnesses.
Ms. Blankenship, is there a place I may speak with Mr. Guest and Mr. Stewart in private?
You can go back to that room back there.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Mr. Riley, you may call your first witness.
Thank you, Mayor. I will call Mr. J.W. Cleary, please.
Mr. Cleary, before you have a seat, can you allow me to swear you in, please?
Okay.
Would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Mr. Cleary.
Yes, sir.
My name's David Riley. I don't know if we've ever had the pleasure of meeting before.
No, sir, I don't think so, but I've seen you around town, but go ahead.
Hopefully in only the best spots like church and other places, right? Well, I apologize it's under these circumstances. But I appreciate your patience in waiting. If you can, Mr. Cleary, can you please state your full name for me for the record?
Joseph W. Cleary, C-L-E-A-R-Y.
Mr. Cleary, are you currently a member of the Paducah chapter of the NAACP?
I am president.
Yes, sir. That was going to be my next question. Do you currently hold any officer roles in that
Yes, sir.
position? And how long have you been the president of that
Oh,
organization?
God, 30 years.
All right. Long time.
Yeah. Because nobody else wanted it. Go ahead.
Sure, no problem. And on on December 15th, 2022, did you appear in front of this commission and call for Mr. Guess's resignation?
I did.
Why did you call for his resignation?
Because of the fact that I take the attitude that it has to start at the top. And, you know, I never thought that I would see an African-American president of the United States. But see, I live in Paducah, Kentucky. When the city took it on, along with the county, took it on as diversity and equity and inclusion as one of their top priorities, it made me, it was like, it was a dream come true. I didn't think we would ever see that day in Paducah, Kentucky. See, it's a thing of talking about something, but fulfilling it is a different story. And when something of this nature happens, it has to come from the top. That was the reason why I took the attitude that it just truly made me feel good that the city did it. And I feel like what actually happened was it just made me feel good that, and I didn't think it would, when it was voted on at that particular time, I didn't think it would be 100% vote that the fact that David would be removed. I didn't think that day would ever happen either. But we've seen it so many times in life, whereas people will talk a good talk, but they won't follow through.
How did you come to know about the text messages that formed the basis for this proceeding?
Like anything, everybody else, just through the news media and stuff of that nature.
Sure. Mr. Cleary, prior to your testimony here this evening, have you met with Ms. Carol Pettit, the special prosecutor, on behalf of the board this evening?
No.
Okay. She's got a gentleman sitting next to her. I think he was stuck in traffic on the way down here, so I assume you hadn't met with him either.
No, I don't, no.
He's a pretty memorable guy. I wouldn't mess with him. Mr. Guess, Mr. Cleary, has your organization ever awarded this city government and this particular board any awards as a result of their efforts?
That was the reason why we done it, because of the fact that we done it, the WPSD prior to that, and they hired several African Americans, and so we didn't think that day would come. But then the city took it on. The only reason why we gave it to the city was because that was one of their priorities. We gave it to the county. That was one of their priorities. We gave it to the college. That was one of their priorities. Diversity, inclusion.
Do you recall when the local chapter of the NAACP gave the commission that award
It was at our Freedom Fund banquet in November.
of 2022?
Yes,
Okay. Only recently, correct?
right.
That award was to the commission as a whole, correct?
As a whole, and David was part of that. I know where you're going, and David was part of that commission. Yes, sir.
I understand he was part of it.
Right.
Have you, to your knowledge, has Mr. Guest ever opposed any of the city's initiatives to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion of minority populations?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I didn't even really know David in a way of speaking. The only time that I really got to know David was we went to Washington, D.C. together, and with the Chamber of Commerce, and I had a chance to sit down and talk to him. And I mean, you didn't ask me no question, but I think David's a good-hearted person. I really believe that. But when you know better, you're supposed to do better. I mean, I've heard that story so many times that I did that maybe because I was drinking, or I heard that story about the fact that that I was tired, or I didn't mean to do it, or whatever. But to me, what happens when you're in those type of circumstances or those situations, the true feelings come out sometimes. So I just feel like that it was a slip up or whatever. But it's there in your heart somewhere, and sometimes when you're in leadership and you guiding the people, it's hard sometimes.
You ever said anything you wish you could take back?
Beautiful. A lot of us feel that way, but it's natural for us to feel that way.
Sure. I'm asking you, Mr. Cleary, have you ever said anything you
Oh,
wish you could take back?
I've done some things that I wish the heck that I never would have done. But then again, a lot of times you have to pay the price.
Well, Mr. Cleary, are you also a member of the Paducah Lions Club?
I am.
Did you attend a meeting of the Lions Club held on December 19th,
I did.
2022?
I did.
Was Mr. Guest up for consideration for
Yes, sir.
membership in that organization at that meeting?
Yes, sir.
How many, and that was just 4 days after your call for his public resignation, is that
Yes,
correct?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
But now keep in mind, make sure the story is told just right now.
Well, Mr. Cleary, I'm honestly not trying to be rude.
No, I know. I'm not trying to, I hope I'm not coming across rude now.
You are not, sir.
I don't mean it. God knows I don't mean nothing negative on anything. I believe in us coming together as African Americans and white Americans to make this a better place for all of us.
I absolutely agree.
So I agree.
I looked at the motto on the local chapter's website, and it doesn't make any mention of any particular race. It says for everybody, right?
You were exactly right, because it was 57 white Americans that started the NAACP. That's the biggest myth in the world. Myth in the world is the fact that it's a black organization. It's not a black organization, it's a people organization. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sure, no problem. We started down this path because of the Lions Club meeting on December 19th, 2022, just 4 days after your calls here in front of this board for his public resignation,
Yes,
correct?
Sir. Yes, sir.
What happened at that Lions Club meeting?
Well, I can tell you exactly what happened. First of all, I'm the only African American in the Paducah Lions Club that's active, and of course it might be some on the books, but I don't think so. And I've been in the Lions Club for several years. In fact, I started out as the Breakfast Lounge Club, and then I wound up being in the Paducah Lounge Club after they came and asked me to speak there one time. But when David and his wife's name came up, now keep in mind, the Lions Club is a civic organization, you know? And so I took the attitude that I didn't want to be the only, everybody, I could almost fill the room out that they just knew that OJW wasn't going to be for David since this situation happened with the city. Well, I wasn't going to be that negative about the situation. I mean, I think that David would have been a fine member for the Lions Club, but I don't think that he would be the type of person that we need in county or city government. I mean, you know, I just think it's two different situations. And I heard that was the reason why, because I spoke up highly of David, or not necessarily highly, don't misunderstand me, because I don't know him that well. Keep that in mind. But I didn't want my vote to be the vote to keep him from not being a member of the Lions Club.
Does Lions Club majority rule on their votes? Is that how the organization works for a membership? Or is it a blackball, like one vote, one strike?
Oh, no, it wouldn't be nothing like that.
Yeah. So even if you had voted against his membership,
Oh, it wouldn't have kept him out, no.
it wouldn't have kept him out.
Yeah.
But you did more than just vote in favor of his membership, correct?
Now, what do you mean by that?
You seconded the motion to
I
admit
second
him
the motion
into.
for him to come in.
Isn't
That's
that-
exactly right. I did that.
Do you deny that you said in doing that Mr. Guest is capable of doing good for the club and our community?
Well, I don't know whether that's what I said or not, but I mean, it's possible that I said that, but I don't know. That might have been, I hope that my Lions Club people didn't tell you that, but that might have been true.
Mr. Cleary, I will present you with what we can mark as exhibit number 8 to this proceeding. These are the minutes from the Lions Club meeting of December 19th, 2022 that we obtained as a result of a subpoena in these proceedings. Mr. Cleary, if you'll follow along with me,
Okay,
at the bottom right-hand corner of this document, it says 1/2. It's a page number,
right.
and I'm turning over onto 2/2.
Wait a second now.
Yes, sir.
What-
I'm turning over to the second page. I
Okay,
guess that's
okay.
only a lawyer could ask a question
Okay,
that way.
okay.
You can read along with me. David Guest and his wife Sandra, sponsored by Lion Jan Levinson. There was a discussion about recent news concerning Mr. Guest and a text message he sent on Election Day. Do you recall there being discussion about that at the Lions
Yes,
Club?
yes, sir, yes, sir.
Mr. Raleigh, do you have extra copies for the commission on that?
Sure
So
do.
they can follow along?
Yeah. These were also provided in my.
Right.
Sorry, Mr. Cleary, I'm beginning again. Next, it says, J.W. Cleary was first to speak up in favor of admitting Mr. Guest. Were you in fact the first person to speak up in favor of admitting Mr. Guest to the Lions Club?
Let me put it to you this way. When his name came up, I don't know whether I was the first person, but they were taking the attitude that I was going to be totally against him coming through. So I took the attitude that I didn't want to be that person to say that he couldn't come into the Lions Club. I still think that it's a two different type of situations, the civic organization and you, unless I guess maybe they talking about, maybe they had a recording that night, I don't know.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Goes on to state, Jack Johnston made a motion to admit David and Sandra as members, which motion was seconded by J.W. Cleary.
Right.
Did you in fact second their
I
motion for
did.
membership in the
I
club?
did.
What does it mean for you, Mr. Cleary, to have seconded the motion for Mr. Guest's admission to the club?
Well, as being a Lions Club member, all my as many years that I've been involved, and membership is going down, and so if we could get a person in there I just feel like that David is not a bad person. Is the fact that he used bad judgment, and but I still feel like that he would be fine for the Lions Club, but I don't feel like that he would be good as being a leader for our. It ain't like that he was the president of the Lions Club. He's just coming in as just a plain old member. But you can kind of fix it however you want to. But I mean, I'm just saying that the fact that I just think it's altogether two different situations. You got oranges and apples.
Sure. Well, then what did you mean by when you said he was capable of doing good for, quote, our community?
Well, I'm going to leave that to however you feel like that. I just feel like that he was fine for the Lions Club, but I was really proud of the city that the fact that we can't tolerate racism of any kind. And to me, that is definitely. So for the Lions Club, I thought that was something different. That's the attitude that I took.
Outside of the text messages that are at issue in this proceeding and having arisen on Election Day in November 2022, do you have any knowledge of Mr. Guest being a racist or a bigot of any type?
No, I don't. But apparently it's in his heart somewhere.
And how would, well, that's fine. Do you recall any other members that were also of the Lions Club that were present that day?
Oh, it was several of them there. Well, I mean, it was our board meeting, so it was just some of the officers. I'm one of the past presidents.
Okay. Can you recount for me who was there?
Oh, well, you got a list of the names, I'm sure, if you got this information here. So, I mean, I remember Jack Johnson was there, and I remember the lady, and she hadn't been in there very long, the lady that presented his name or whatever. And then, of course, our president, Clay. Let me think, who else was in that room? Boy, I can't remember everybody that was there.
This record before you is Exhibit 8 to this proceeding indicates that Shay Nickel was present.
Yeah, Shay was in there. Yeah, Shay was there. Sure was. And Mr. The preacher, Reverend, the Reverend was there also. That's his church, in fact.
Do you know what position Mr. Nickel holds in state government?
Well, he's Supreme Court Justice.
Okay.
For the state of Kentucky.
Does the Lions Club have any policy statements or guiding principles for its members that would tell them that would promote diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, now that I'm not sure.
Okay. As a past president, you're not aware of what those may or may not be?
Right.
Okay. Was the vote on Mr. Guest's admission to the Lions Club unanimous?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a fact.
If you believed that Mr. Guest was a racist, a true racist, you wouldn't have admitted him. You would at least have voted against his membership in the Lions Club, correct?
I don't think that Mr. Guest is a true racism. You know, in life, what happens is people do what they're taught. I mean, in other words, I think David's probably a good person, but somewhere down the line, maybe the teaching of it is still in his heart. I mean, I don't know.
Should people be given any grace for a momentary lapse of judgment?
What you're saying might be true, but then again, if you have zero tolerance, if you let one person go because of something of this nature, why would that give the other person okay to that if you chastise or you fire this person, why shouldn't you chastise or fire that person? I mean, you can't have two sets of rules the way I look at it.
You'll agree with me then. I think the implication of your testimony is that people should be given grace for momentary lapses of judgment.
We all have come short. That's exactly right. We've all done some things that we're not proud of.
Just to summarize, First of all, I'm sorry, before I get ahead of myself, I would move this commission to admit what we've marked as Exhibit 8 to this proceeding, which are the minutes of the Lions Club from December 19th, 2022. Those are accompanied by a certificate of authenticity, rendering them admissible in this proceeding.
No objection. That's exhibit number,
I believe that's 8.
Have it as 8. Exhibit 7 was the
yep.
termination notices.
We're just checking how you all were doing your numbering. That's good.
Just to summarize, Mr. Cleary, you don't deny that as you sit here tonight,
No, I'm not.
that 4 days after standing in front of this commission and calling for Mr. Guest's resignation, you supported and seconded a motion to admit him to the Lions Club upon the statement that you believe he is capable of doing good for the club and for the community.
That's correct.
Mr. Cleary, I'm sorry we had to meet under these circumstances. I hope we meet in more pleasant ones.
No, that's fine.
Thank
No,
you.
we're okay. We're okay.
That's all the questions I have.
Ms. Pettit.
Mr. Cleary, I suppose I'm sorry about the circumstances, but I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to you, so I'm glad that I met you tonight,
Okay.
so to speak.
All right.
I do have one question.
All right.
I know you've touched on this, but I want to make sure I really understand. You've touched on it a few times and said something to the effect of being just, and referring to Mr. Guest, being just a member of a civic organization is a whole lot different than holding a public office or being a leader, a governmental leader. Can you explain to me more why that is so different in your mind?
How can I tell you to do something? Or how can I agree that we're not going to tolerate any type of racism of any kind, and then I go and do it myself? I mean, I don't, that's the part that I guess I'm not getting. If it, to me, the only way that we're going to solve racism in this country is the fact that it has to come from the top. Whether it be the President of the United States or whether it be the mayor of a particular city. But if we keep letting situations go on without being punished of some kind, then we're going to keep the same thing going to just keep happening over and over and over. So you got to have some type of regulations. And that was the reason why that I used the example, that the fact that I never would have thought that in this city, I've been here for 60 some odd years, and I never would have thought that I would see the city. I mean, we got a flag out there on highway at exit 16 that it's a flag that, buddy, I tell you what, it's just, we have to hope and pray that things is gonna happen for the good, for the community. But if the top keep letting things go, we're going to continue to have the same type of community that we have. But I just feel like the Lions Club, to me, is just a civic organization. But we have to look to the city and the county government to change and the state. We have to look at these leaders to help change our businesses, to me, it's just different. It's just altogether different. If it don't start at the top, just whatever starts at the top, it's going to roll down. If bull crap rolls down, then that's what we're going to have, a bull crap city. We have come closer to trying to have a city that is more together than any other city in the United States. I really and truly believe that. Because I feel that some of the things that are happening here, it's not happening everywhere else. I mean, I can even remember that the fact that racism was so blatant in our area. But that's the reason why I take the attitude. I feel like that we're on the right track of making a difference. And if that means giving the city an award or the county award, or because sometimes if you tell people that we see what you're doing and we appreciate what you're doing, that things will change. we as African Americans have always believed in loving thy neighbor as thyself. But we wonder sometimes that the fact that, and that's what we're taught, supposed to be taught. But what we wonder as African Americans, if white Americans was taught that same philosophy, love thy neighbor as thyself. We wonder about that sometimes because racism is real. And we begin in this community to start talking about it and trying to make a difference. I mean, even our Chamber of Commerce, it used to be lily white in a way of speaking. But now we're getting where we get inclusion. A lot of the job places that we go to, our application, it wasn't even thought of whether it would be a consideration. Ours was thrown into the trash can. So if it starts at the top, then we're gonna have a better community for all of us. And you know, the biggest question that white Americans ask black people once they do something special for them, they'll say, what do you want? Well, we want the same thing you want. We want a nice car. We want a nice education for our kids. We want a nice house. We don't want just the crumbs and what's left over. That's what we want everything that you want. White American want. That's what it boiled down to. So
I think you said it best. Maybe when you know better, you're supposed to do better.
You do.
Thank you, Mr. Cleary.
I got to say one thing.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you can only respond to questions. I'm not trying to cut you off, Mr. Cleary, but
You can cut me off, but I'm gonna leave you with this here.
Here's my question, Mr. Cleary. What would you like to say?
Children are not born with racism.
foundation.
They're taught racism.
Mr. Cleary, sorry. One more question.
Yes, sir.
Now that Ms. Pettit has finished with her examination, have you ever seen any action by Mr. Guess when he is sitting on this commission and voting
No, sir.
that would have suggested that he didn't want the black members of our community not to have good schools,
No, sir.
not to have good homes to live in,
No, sir.
not to have good jobs to go to?
No, sir.
You've never seen anything in Mr. Guess's character or your experiences with him that would suggest that he wants any of those, that he does not want those things for the members of our community that happen to be African American.
I agree with you 100%. Ask Mr. Guess how long did it take him to officially make apology?
Mr. Cleary, would you like to see? We have the timestamps on the very text messages that he sent that day. And immediately upon sending it, we've heard the testimony from Mr. Greg Cherry tonight. That Mr. Cherry didn't even have a chance to look at his phone before Mr. Guest said, I am sorry. He said it it was 1 minute later he said he was sorry to the person he sent it to. That was his apology. And he stood in front of this commission at least twice and apologized.
We understood.
Okay.
It took a long time before he actually made official apology. In fact, it was after he had let go. And when you wrong, you apologize under duress. I mean, after the fact. But we'll leave that alone. That ain't what you said.
Do you deny that he apologized immediately on November the 8th for his statement?
On a phone text.
Mr. Cleary,
Okay.
Not
object
to
to the
the
form of the
community.
question. Mr. Cleary doesn't know the intent of
Okay.
Mr. Guest.
Right.
That's fine. Sorry, Mr. Cleary, we've had our fun. I apologize. Thank you. I appreciate your patience.
Any more questions?
No more
Okay, we're
questions.
good.
Thank you, Mr. Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Cleary. You're free to go.
Prior to the hearing tonight, Ms. Pettit and I discussed about the omission of some text messages to avoid having to call some other witnesses. So I would like to move to admit what will be Exhibit Number 9 to these proceedings, which are text messages exchanged between former Commissioner Carol Galt, Commissioner David Guess, and Commissioner Sandra Wilson, occurring on November the 8th, 2022, and before 4:29 p.m.
Those are the ones all involving Mr. Guest as a participant? Or
That's right. It was a group text which he was a participant.
is it this one?
That's right.
And so that is cumulative. Are you making those separate exhibits?
No, that'll be a cumulative exhibit.
If it's a cumulative exhibit, I have 5 pages. Is that correct?
I'll come over there. They may be the same thing. This may be in a different format. I pulled them off an open records request. Okay, well, this is, I like it better. It's because it's bigger.
Is it that? Let's make sure it's the same system. Okay, so just use this one.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any objection.
Okay.
No objection? You trusted me with the original exhibit.
Poll reporters always get mad at me on those.
Right.
Is that Exhibit 9?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
While we're on the subject of exhibits, I didn't write down what Exhibit 5 was.
There's no Exhibit 5. That was a video that wasn't used.
While we're also on the subject of exhibits, I just want to make sure that the record reflects that I believe the mayor has admitted all 1 through 4 and 6 through 9. That you all's understanding? There is no Exhibit 5?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know that he's verbally said each time admitted, but we just want to make sure the record reflected that you did agree to admit all of those, right?
Right.
All right.
Mr. Riley was number 4 years.
Yes, we have it right here.
Okay.
We have the original, right?
Yes.
The text message with the timestamp.
Got it.
I don't have any more witnesses.
I'm sorry.
No more witnesses, Mr. Mayor.
Do you have any
I do not,
rebuttal?
Mr. Mayor.
Okay. All right, Mr. Riley, do you have a closing statement?
I do, Mr. Mayor. May we take a brief 5-minute recess so I may be able to collect my thoughts based on the testimony we've heard this evening?
Yes, that's fine.
I promise to be brief.
Okay. 5-minute recess. Mr. Riley, are you ready?
I am, Mr. Mayor, but I believe we have to wait on the
sorry.
special prosecutor to return.
Apologies.
Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Riley, closing statements.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Want to again thank this commission, this board, the city employees, opposing counsel, public for being here this evening. It's now time for this board to make a decision, to render, to deliberate, and to come to a conclusion on this matter, one way or another. I always, in giving closing statements, am mindful that I cannot predict what Ms. Pettit may argue about. She bears the burden of proof in this situation. She has to prove it to you that Mr. Guest should be removed. So I'm in the unenviable position of representing him, providing him counsel, but not being able to respond to her arguments. But I'll give you the recollection that I have of this evening's evidence and provide you my arguments about how I believe that you should interpret what you've heard. You are called to determine whether Mr. Guest's conduct across 10 minutes on November 8th, 2022, were misconduct in the performance of the duties of his office. I want to begin first. In a former life, if I hadn't had to become a lawyer to make a living, I would have loved to have been a professor. So I'll begin first with some of the law with which I believe is applicable here that I've tried to demonstrate on this board that's way far away from you. Under KRS 83A 040 subsection 9, a commissioner may only be removed for misconduct in the performance of the duties of his office. The Kentucky Supreme Court has issued this statement regarding this standard applicable to elected officials. A person can do a purely personal act while in the process of performing official functions. However reprehensible his conduct as an individual may have been, it is only in the misconduct and the connection with his duties that the Constitution authorizes him to be removed from office. This evening, Commissioners, I'll submit to you that you have not heard any testimony about what Mr. Guest did on Election Day over a 10-minute period was conduct in the performance of the duties of his office. And I can show you what those are. They happen to be listed in another statute, KRS 83A 150. You've heard no testimony that and that statute happens to be titled Powers and Duties of the Board of Commissioners. You've heard no testimony that his misconduct was in designating a member of this board as the mayor pro tem, in conducting meetings, establishing offices of the city, enacting codes or ordinances for the public safety, health, and welfare, provide sufficient revenue, setting a budget, appointing a city manager, or investigating activities of government and officers and employees. Those are the duties which you as the board have. They're statutorily defined. And you've heard no evidence that what Mr. Guest did was in the conduct of those duties. You've heard it from Mr. Cherry himself. Mr. Cherry told you he was off duty when Mr. Guest's text messages were sent to him. He wasn't even on duty. And Mr. Cherry didn't do anything in response to them. In those text messages, Mr. Cherry didn't call any employees to go remove any signs, certainly didn't call any employees to go remove anything that he felt was racially motivated. He didn't take any action as a result of what Mr. Guest told him in those text messages. I think that what the board has to measure is whether those text messages motivated any action in response, and they did not. It's been definitively proved here this evening. As you've heard testimony from the HR director this evening, no single commissioner has the power or authority to do anything in the city government. It takes a vote of this board. Mr. Guest summarized it as 3 votes to sell City Hall. But on November 8th, 2022, Mr. Guest didn't have any votes to do anything listed in KRS 83A150. He was not acting in the performance of the duties of his office. I believe that should be the end of the line for this commission's legal decision that you're in the unenviable position to render. But you also have to consider whether Mr. Guest's actions on November the 8th, 2022 were misconduct. We don't have a guidepost in statute to determine that. All we can have is the testimony that we've heard here this evening. Again, I would reiterate that no one did anything in response to Mr. Guest's text messages. It's contrary, I believe, from the evidence that you will see that's been presented in the exhibits of promptings by other members of this commission. The city wants to make, the city and the special prosecutor want to make great reference to and reliance upon this so-called zero tolerance policy as a measure by which Mr. Guest can be convicted in this proceeding. You've heard from the HR manager herself that that policy is not written. Mr. Guest can't go look at it to know what's to be said or done. You even heard from her testimony that in investigating or applying this so-called misconduct policy, the conduct revealed that there were multiple instances directed toward people of opposite races. Mr. Guest's comments on November the 8th, 2022 were not directed at another employee of an opposite race and weren't directed with any animus. You've heard Mr. Guest apologize for this repeatedly. I can't judge whether you believe he was sincere or not. That's up to you. But we've heard that he says he was. And all we can do is rely upon him. Now, I really enjoyed meeting Mr. Cleary. I never met him before. Somebody I'd like to meet again. But there's no doubt that you saw him yourself. He stood before you on December the 15th and called for Mr. Guest's resignation. And then 4 days later, he, as a member of the Lions Club, accompanied by a sitting Kentucky Supreme Court justice, voted to admit Mr. Guest into membership in that organization. And Mr. Cleary did not deny, saying, I believe that Mr. Guest can do good for the club and the community. Mr. Guest has done good for this community in his votes on the board that he has been accompanied by with you for these diversity and inclusion initiatives. He's still capable of doing good on this board. Finally, I wish to end with a word of caution about the appropriate exercise of the enormous power that you hold in your hands. To convict Mr. Guest in these circumstances, this board will be adopting a standard that requires absolute perfection in every communication that you ever make, in every thought that ever crosses your mind. This board will be adopting a standard of absolute perfection that leaves no room for explanation, interpretation, or mercy. Under the standard you will set, it will become wholly insufficient for a human being to misspeak and to recognize immediately, as Mr. Guest did once he misspoke. I mean, it's uncontested that it was immediate that he apologized. You will set a standard that is wholly insufficient for a human being to misspeak, recognize it immediately, that his choice of words was poor, and made it.
1 minute remains.
Yeah, thank you. Made it the culmination of an election season. You'll be setting a standard that requires absolute perfection. Convict Mr. Guest today, and you will be letting every current and future office holder know that they too will be convicted of every misstatement they make, no matter how quickly they realize it was wrong and apologize for it and repudiate it without ever being asked to do so. This is an unobtainable and unrealistic standard that will do irrevocable damage to this board. It will create grounds for removing publicly elected officials for any reason or no reason at all, and will create an unlivable society in which momentary lapses are treated as permanent, disqualifying diseases on a person's reputation and the rest of their life. Please don't turn this city into this place. Please don't overturn the votes of more than 3,000 people that voted for Mr. Guest, and I implore you not to remove him this evening. Thank you for your consideration.
Ms. Pettit?
That's not what we're asking this board to do. We are not asking this board to demand perfection. Asking this board to recognize that its members, the leaders of this community, should not say reprehensible things, should not be held to a lower standard than we hold our city employees to. Although closing statements aren't legal arguments, they're just our summation of what we believe has been presented to this board. I would like to point out a fallacy. 83A.150 sub 6 that Mr. Riley just relied on provides that official duties include a quote, otherwise inquiring into the conduct of duties of any department, office, or agency of the city. It is undisputed, because you heard Mr. Guest testify to it. He messaged Mr. Cherry because Mr. Cherry was the city employee that was in charge of the signs. Clearly, his conduct fell under those official duties. Misconduct is an intentional wrongdoing or improper behavior. It's undisputed that Mr. Guest intentionally wrote and sent that text because he said he intentionally wrote and sent that text. It is undisputed that that text message was inappropriate because Mr. Guest agreed that it was. You heard your city employee, Greg Cherry, testify. He perceived he was receiving a communication from a city commissioner. I heard what Mr. Guest said in his self-serving statement and testimony, but Greg Cherry said I was getting a text from a city commissioner, and that made me uncomfortable, and it made me fear that if I didn't treat this right, I could lose my job. Mr. Cherry knew that Mr. Guest shouldn't have made that kind of comment, and Mr. Guest knew he shouldn't have made that comment. The city had, well before this comment was ever published or sent to anyone, implemented a no-tolerance policy with respect to language based on race, and the consequence of engaging in that type of communication was immediate termination from employment. We've heard a little bit of talk about the conversations, the text messages that went back and forth that day about the election signs. Those are irrelevant. It does not matter why Mr. Guest made that statement. It does not matter that he was tired from the election. All of you have been in election settings. We all know it's exhausting. It does not matter if he was stressed. And it doesn't matter, and I don't know if that was a sincere apology on Exhibit 4, or if that was a kid got caught taking the cookie and wasn't sorry he got the cookie, but was really, really sorry he got caught. I don't know what it was. No one does. The conversations leading up to that statement are irrelevant. It doesn't matter why Mr. Guest made that statement. And we heard some testimony attempting to differentiate that statement from the statements made by the city employees. It doesn't matter if the person that received or heard a racist comment felt threatened or felt harassed or, like Mr. Cherry, felt uncomfortable. We don't say those things, and that's what the City of Paducah has said in all its efforts to address this head on. We don't say those types of things because they shouldn't be said. We don't have to take it to the next step of deciding, well, was the person that was standing nearby uncomfortable, or is it okay if the person standing nearby was uncomfortable or felt harassed, or is it if the person that received it felt uncomfortable or harassed? We shouldn't have to evaluate the perception of the person that witnessed or was the recipient of that type of statement. Mr. Guest sent that. He knew it was offensive. He immediately apologized for it, whether that was to try to counteract it or actually apologize, I don't know. Under no set of circumstances was that acceptable, and under no set of circumstances, you heard the testimony, would that type of comment be tolerated from one of our employees? Mr. Guest is the leader of this community. You heard him say he's the hiring and firing of the city. All of you all are. There's talk about why he did it. Oh, I knew it was a mistake. What caused him to send the comment? Let's be very clear. In Exhibit 4, where the timestamps are in there was a lot of talk about this was immediately addressed and that was immediately sent. What wasn't pointed out, that in his Exhibit 4, it took 10 minutes for Mr. Guest to come up with the "Whitey keeping a black man down" comment. That wasn't part of an ongoing conversation. He took some time. That was not an immediate knee-jerk response. And if you, I'm sure the exhibits will go back to deliberations with you, you'll be able to check that out. When we started this evening, Mr. Riley told us, and I didn't write it down verbatim, but it's pretty close, no one wanted for these things to happen and no one wants to be here, or words to that effect. That is absolutely correct. We should all wish things like this never happen. We should all wish thoughts like that never occurred, much less being said out loud or in print. The city holds its employees accountable. You heard it. That's the testimony. If this were a city employee, he would have been fired. And I understand that Mr. Riley has tried to differentiate and tell us repeatedly that no tolerance policy doesn't apply to Mr. Guest because he's a city commissioner. So because Mr. Guest is a leader of this community and a city commissioner, he should be held less accountable? That makes no sense. Mr. Cleary said it very well. It has got to start at the top. And I'll tell you, because I have a little bit of time, this incident made me think of something. My 13-year-old daughter, when she was 13, had her first boyfriend. And that young man, when my children bring home boyfriends or girlfriends, I ask them, are they respectful? What did they do with their life? Do they have a purpose? And she said, yes, Mom, he's respectful and all the things, and he's very nice, etc. And that young man put my daughter on speakerphone in front of all of his friends and humiliated her. She didn't know his friends were listening. He called her awful names based upon his own insecurities and really nothing that she had done. And after I heard that, the individuals that I was most, I won't say upset with, but disappointed in, were his friends that were sitting there listening to him say these awful things for whatever reason, whatever in his soul made him say these awful things. And they didn't do anything about it. And then I thought about it again. I've had a 13-year-old son. They didn't really feel like they had any power to do anything about it. This commission does. Board of Commissioners has power to do something about it. Based on the evidence and testimony presented to you today, that's exactly what you should do. You should vote for removal of David Guess. Thank you.
Okay, so we ready to go into executive? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session.
A proposed motion of the Board of Commissioners to go into closed session for discussion of matters pertaining to the following topic: issues which might lead to the discipline or dismissal of a member, i.e. Commissioner, as permitted by KRS 61.8101F.
Second.
You made the motion, I'll second. A second.
Call roll, please.
Commissioner Henderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson? Aye. Mayor Bray?
Aye. Commission has already come out of executive session, so we're back in regular session. We have a couple of motions and votes, and then a couple of commissioners are here are going to make statements. So I'll ask our city clerk, please read the first motion.
A proposed motion of the Board of Commissioners that the Board of Commissioners issue the following finding. Having heard and reviewed the evidence presented at this hearing, the Board of Commissioners finds that Commissioner David Guest committed the offense of misconduct, as that term is used in KRS 83A.040, subsection 9, when he sent text messages to a city employee which stated, open quote, "You got Dewan under control," end quote, and, open quote, "Whitey keeping a black man down," end quote.
So moved.
Second.
Please call roll.
Commissioner Henderson?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Mayor Bray?
Aye. Please read the second motion.
A proposed motion of the Board of Commissioners that the Board of Commissioners remove Commissioner David Guest from the office of City Commissioner effective immediately.
So moved.
Second.
Call roll.
Commissioner Henderson?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Mayor Bray?
Aye. Okay, before we go to adjourn, I have a statement that I want to read on behalf of my fellow commissioners. Over the last 60 days, the City Commission has had to wrestle with one of the toughest issues that city leaders will ever face. The decision to remove a commissioner, while very challenging and defining for the entire community, clarifies what we believe is a standard for behavior as leaders of our city going forward. While we have much work left to do, our community has made tremendous gains in the area of diversity, equity, and minority inclusion. This is one area that defines the city that we all want to live in, where we want our children to live, and where others will choose to live when they make relocation decisions in the future. Simply stated, as a community, we have made many gains, and the Commission is simply not willing to give up any of the ground we have gained. And I believe Commissioner Henderson wants to speak.
Along those same lines that the rest of the commissioners have made, this is perhaps the most difficult decision that I would have to make, I hope I would ever have to make as a city commissioner. And I think I want Commissioner Guest to understand that this is not personal, but it's principle. And we have made some great advances in the area of diversity and equity and inclusion, of which you voted for. And it has to begin at the top. It has to begin with leadership. It all starts from the top and it goes down. And so I hope that you will understand that, because to do anything else tonight would actually be making a backward step. Sorry.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Call roll.
Commissioner Henderson?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Mayor Bray?
Aye.